All right, now we're going to move on to autism and fluency. And I want to be very clear here. Autism is usually done on a spectrum, all right? So I'll typically say, and this is with any person who's neurodivergent, you've seen one person with autism, you know one person with autism, because it's different for different people, all right? So some of the things I'm going to point out here, they're not for all people with autism, okay? So autism, we typically look at as a social communication difference. And that's really where it is, because I really want to make sure that we're not saying that there's a breakdown here, because that's not the correct way to describe this, all right? So you know we have the 4-part processor. We have the phonological and the orthographic. Typically, people with autism will be fine with those, okay? The two areas where there will be some issues are with the meaning and the contextual executive functioning processor. And it's not that they're not working correctly. They work differently. They don't integrate as much as they could, okay? Just want to point that out. So let's talk about executive functioning first, all right? Because there are many people who have autism who are very good at planning. They have excellent working memories, all right? They're very good at those, at paying attention. They're very good at it. So there are some that do struggle with that. I mean, don't struggle with that. Can I talk tonight? But some of the things they may kind of struggle with is that cognitive flexibility, being able to go from one thing to another quickly. And that kind of works in with the literal to the inferential, okay? Another kind of issue might be with the emotional type regulation and being able to work around with that, all right? But the main area that works differently tends to be the meaning, all right? And here is something that I didn't know until I really started working with people with fluency, especially with people with autism. When it comes to fluency, you have accuracy and rate. People with autism typically do that pretty well. Prosody is where there tends to be a difference, all right? So prosody is that expression, reading with expression. Now, prosody is a social communication way for us to, express what we're reading, understand what we're reading, and we know it is important. But for people with autism, it's not the primary way that we should be assessing whether or not they're understanding. Okay. People with autism may not read with prosody, but they still might understand because their understanding is more internal and they may not express it, or they may struggle with expressing it, or they may not find it important to express it. So something that I would really caution is having somebody read to you and you go, oh, well, their prosody is very monotone, and so you think there's issues. We always want to double check that with some silent reading, because yes, people with autism can struggle with reading comprehension just like everybody else. But just because they struggle with prosody does not mean that they struggle with understanding what they're reading. I'd also like to point out that many people with autism have excellent vocabularies. So this is not meaning that the meaning processor is not working. It's just working differently, all right? Like I said, more internal. It might be more deliberate. It might be more literal. And which is why fluency is a little different for those on the spectrum. So one thing I do want to point out is that the comorbidity, remember that means happening at the same time, for people with autism and having ADHD, I'm going to give you some of the numbers on that one, are about 30 to about 50%. So if you have somebody who has autism and they also have ADHD, that's going to intensify the issues with the executive functioning processor. So I'm just going to put that out there with that. And also, if you have somebody who has autism, ADHD, and dyslexia, which can happen, percentages would be 25 to 40%, then that's somebody who is struggling with all 4 of the processors, okay? So your intervention, the way you're going to approach it is going to be a little different. Hey, I just want to take this moment to say that for each of the neurodivergent types that we went over so far. That has nothing to do with intelligence. It has nothing to do with not having empathy or not having control over yourself or any of that, okay? And people who are neurodivergent can learn to read. We're just talking about the differences on how we support those who struggle with reading, or mainly struggle with fluency. That's what this one focuses on, okay? I just want to make sure that we took a second to say that, all right?